Welcome back to the We See Monsters channel. I'm your host Jenna, and today I have a story told by one of the locals of a small town who claims that there is something lurking in the woods just on the outskirts of where they live. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail during my intro and give away the meat and potatoes of this story, so I'll just go ahead and jump right into it. I live in a small town, far away from the bustling urban cities that many people live in. It's like those stereotypical small neighborhoods where everyone knows each other. I like living here, in the fresh air with kind and friendly neighbors all around me. However, our town has a dark secret that no one speaks about. It's the woods right next to the town. Everyone in the town has gone to the woods at least once. We usually had some people go hunting there during the hunting season, and also had plenty of people go for walks there. However, growing up, we have always heard terrible rumors about the forest. Amongst all the stories about mythical creatures and weird caves, one story in particular has stuck with me. The story goes like this. Around 30 years ago, back when most of our parents were also teenagers, one group of 4 teenagers decided to go camping in the summer holidays. Their parents supported it, and so they set off after a couple days of preparation. On the first day, they quickly set up their tents, then went ahead and started to do a bit of exploration before settling down and setting up a campfire for the night. Towards the late evening, one of the teens, David, the only survivor, felt like something was wrong. He had that deep gut feeling, the one that grips your heart with an icy grip. He didn't know how to vocalize this to his friends, but he did tell them that he felt something was wrong. Imagine sitting with your friends in an open forest with tall, dark trees, a rather small campfire being the only source of light. You could say David was just scared, but he swore he could see a blur of movement in the thick darkness of the trees every now and then. He felt completely exposed out in the middle of nowhere, with the wind whistling against the trees. And then it happened. His friend Richard also noticed the movement in the trees. It was subtle before, but now it constantly appeared all around them. It was the blur of a dark humanoid figure that kept disappearing and then reappearing in some other spot again. It happened to always be out of the perimeter of the light of the campfire, so none of its details could ever be made out. By now, the teenagers were spooked and everyone had realized that there was definitely something out there. It was also hard to convince each other that the movement was nothing more than a wild animal, when the figure was, quite obviously, humanoid in shape. The group had 2 choices: to run back home quickly through the dark forest and be careful not to lose their way or trip and hurt themselves out in the middle of nowhere, or to stay put at the campsite and wait until the morning to return home. That same figure began to move more frantically through the shadowy silhouettes of the trees, seeming like it was circling them like a predator hunting its prey. Now David decided to make a run home through the woods as the others yelled out after him. He would later say it was a gut instinct that told him to run as far away as he could from that thing, to continue running until his legs burned and his lungs felt like they were being pulled apart. As soon as David ran halfway to the line of the trees, the creature suddenly stopped moving, causing David to freeze. A menacing silence descended upon the forest. The group, with the exception of David, were still huddled around the campfire, shivering, not from the cold, but from fear. The leaves began to rustle from beyond the tree line, and slowly but surely, the figure that had been circling and watching them for some time now appeared out of the tree line. As its features began to be illuminated by the light from the campfire, the group's screams filled the silence. As David would later describe it, the creature had a humanoid body and was wearing long track pants and a hoodie. However, it had something very, very wrong about it. Its face was upside down. The large circular bloodshot eyes were in place of the mouth, while the nose was twisted and pointing upwards. The mouth of the creature was contorted into an upside-down grin, which almost looked like a cartoonish frown. The teeth were razor-sharp and yellow with stains of red. Its skin was pale and thin, with blue veins visible all over the face. Its fingernails ended in long, sharp points like daggers. As the group stared at the creature in frozen fear, it lunged in a fraction of a second towards the 3 teenagers still next to the campfire. It used its nails to rip everyone apart in a few agonizing moments like a paper shredder to a piece of paper. It then hungrily fed on the flesh of the dying teenagers. David broke out of his trance as soon as he saw the creature locked its misplaced eyes directly with him. He turned around and began to run into the woods. The creature moved at an incredibly fast pace as it caught up to him in a matter of seconds. It grabbed David's arm and dug its nails deep into his shoulder until David's shrill screams could be heard from the town. It all happened in slow motion. David continued to pull away from the creature in a desperate attempt to run and get away from it, but the creature had a very solid grip of his entire arm. The creature had made one mistake, though, which let David survive. It had dug its nails so far into David's arm that after a few long moments of David desperately pulling away, his entire arm ripped away from his body. David would later continue running until he collapsed from blood loss. An early morning runner would find him by the side of the running trail, and he would make a miraculous recovery in a city hospital. The campsite would be found later by rescue crews, covered in blood and gore, with the barely recognizable bodies of the 3 boys arranged in a triangle around the long, dead campfire. David is still alive today, and he's told his story to every kid in town. You can see him stare out into the woods with his only hand leaning on the wooden fence of his balcony, watching the tree line with blank, empty eyes. People in our town would only go to the woods during the morning and be sure to come back before sunset. It's not that anyone fully believed David's story. Some thought he had developed false memories from the traumatic event, while some say he could have dreamed it up in his medically induced coma. But no one can deny the fact that that night something did happen in the woods. People may have tried to comfort themselves by not believing his story, but no one dared camp in those woods again. This brings me back to my story. Yesterday, I missed my typical morning run because of a work obligation, and so I decided to still exercise in the evening. The sun had almost dipped over the horizon, and the sky had started to darken from the orange and purple color to a rather dark blue. The trees stood tall on either side of the trail, where only darkness existed beyond the tree line. I was running pretty fast and nearly back out of the woods and at home when the sound of the birds completely stopped. A deafening silence permeated the air like the calm before a storm. I began to run even more frantically as bad thoughts began to appear in my mind. Just as I was at the end of the trail and out of the woods, I saw a blur of a figure right beside me, staring at me from the tree line. I could swear that just as I made it out of the woods, it disappeared back into the tree line with a frown on its face. Except there was something wrong with the face. It was upside down. Be sure to click the links below to check out my TikTok and listen to the We See Monsters podcast, and hit the subscribe button for more spooky content.